So this is what it feels like to see a Wolverine movie done right, that is.
Logan, what did you do?
Charles, the world is not the same as it was.
What is she?
Beneath the stain
She's like you.
of time,
Very much like you.
the feelings disappear away.
Logan, you still have time.
So hey guys, welcome to Owen Sound. Today I'm going to be talking about Logan. This is a new film directed by James Mangold, who actually previously directed The Wolverine, the one that was set in Japan, not the terrible launch of the Wolverine side trilogy. Also known for stuff like 3:10 to Yuma, Night and Day, which is that Tom Cruise action comedy, and most notably Walk the Line. This movie of course stars Hugh Jackman as the titular Logan or Wolverine, and yeah, he's just really delivering probably one of the best performances I've seen him in a long time. I mean, considering most of the stuff I've seen him in has been as Wolverine, I really feel like this is him giving a great, I guess, send-off to the character, considering that his is the last movie he said he'd do. And I really feel like he gave it his all, trying to bring this as like this really great final performance and summarizing everything that he's done with the character up to this point. Patrick Stewart really pulls out his Shakespearean actor credit with the amount of emotion and just range of, I think, feelings and just, I guess, parts of emotions that you see him bringing out in his last showing here, as well as Charles Xavier. He goes from mental illness, dependency, compassion, and just goes through all these different emotions and feeling like a Charles Xavier you haven't exactly seen before, and even goes into certain points and throwing a little sass and kind of acting a bit like a kid. And it was just a really fun performance to watch, as much as the movie does focus on Logan. This movie is starting the new tradition I've been seeing of amazing child actors in movies, just delivering anything more than you would expect from even an adult actor, let alone a child who you mainly see in movies and start cringing at. I'm of course talking about Daphne Keene's portrayal of Laura, or X-23 for you comic book fans, but I just really felt like she gave this amazing performance, and she gives such a great performance before she even starts talking in the movie that it's a wonder they managed to find a kid actor that was this great. And when she does start talking, I don't feel like her performance goes downhill in any way. I just felt like it was so amazing to see how much of a performance she gave even before this. I actually noted it in my head. I was like, wow, she hasn't even spoken a word and I'm already so into her character. Boyd Holbrook gives a great performance as Pierce, as a kind of, I guess, charismatic type of villain, where he brings both, I guess, a sense of evil overall throughout the movie, but you also feel a sense of, I guess, kind of enjoying his character while you're getting him on screen. And I feel like he just has such a great charisma to his character that you both hate him but love to watch him while he's on screen. He's just kind of fun, and really just enjoys what he's doing. And lastly, Stephen Merchant's brief time on screen as Caliban is kind of fun. I felt like he was kind of like the Abe from Hellboy type of character in this movie, but given that he's actually not able to do much within the plot and just doesn't get enough screen time, as Patrick Stewart is obviously the person that you're going to cast as your other lead for this movie, it just felt like his character was almost unnecessary and could have been written off entirely. I also felt like it was a little strange that they were picking Caliban, which is a character that appeared for 2 seconds in the last X-Men movie that came out. Not that I have any trouble with that. I just felt like, as an audience, a lot of people might not even know who Caliban is, and I felt like the character itself didn't seem to bring enough to the movie overall that I felt like it could have been written off, as fun as it always is to see Stephen Merchant on screen. One thing I noticed most is I felt like the movie was very bookended in terms of the great parts of the movie. Obviously the ending of this movie is going to be very powerful, and the start of the movie just felt like you were getting so much information about this world and you're just getting so involved in the story that I really felt the start of this movie worked really well, and it was kind of like you're learning everything while trying to not feel like that's all you're doing while you're watching the movie. But I felt like the middle part of the movie just seemed like a lot of run to place, fight people, and along the way there actually is a lot of great character development and certain things like this. I did feel at times like this didn't exactly work as the filmmakers intended, because I still feel like we got most of these types of moments at the start and end of the film, and I just felt like the middle could have been buffed out a little bit more and given more time to actually properly connect to the characters rather than having action sequences and interactions between characters on their own with other people that weren't the leads. This said that the sparseness of the action in this movie actually made the action sequences better, and I just felt like the way that they went about this movie is trying to make it something that wasn't dependent on the action but had action in it, made it work a lot better. In terms of the action too, it was very nice to see a movie like this get an 18+ rating, as I felt like it just couldn't have been the necessary level of violence for a movie about Wolverine, and both the, I guess, level of expressiveness, as they do drop a lot of F-bombs, but just like I felt like they were allowed to be free with what they wanted to do with this movie, and I didn't feel like I was watching some censored version of something along these lines, and I wonder if that have a lot to do with Deadpool and how well that did for an 18+ movie. So I wonder if that has something to do with it, but it was nice to see them not trying to snake this into some PG-13 PG rating that would have really taken a lot of the wind out of some of the more expressive parts of the movie. Now, some of the ambiguity of the backstory between this and the last movie that we saw Wolverine in is kind of interesting. I like that they don't try to tell you everything, and they leave a lot up to just throwaway lines where somebody says, you know, something happened, you remember this city. And I felt like that was actually kind of cool, where they just kind of give you like a little note on something that must have happened that was so bad that the characters don't even want to talk about it. And it felt really interesting, especially considering there's only a handful of X-Men regulars in this movie, that it really felt interesting to see them try to give this kind of, I guess, a post-apocalyptic, for lack of a better word, I guess, future, and to see them try and, I guess, try to tell a story on its own that could survive on its own, that also gives you some of a little bit of context to the rest of the movies. Although I did feel like I needed a little bit more on the aging and whole thing with Wolverine becoming an old man, as I felt like the adamantium poisoning seemed a bit off, as I do know there's something in the comics about him getting a virus that degenerates his healing. So I felt like it was kind of strange, and I felt like there could have been a slightly larger explanation just to clear it up, as I felt like this was one little note that kind of stuck in the back of my head but didn't ruin the movie for me, really. I also thought that the inclusion of the X-Men comics in this universe was very interesting. It was interesting also because they weren't in the original X-Men movies, but I thought it was kind of this cool, like, alternate history, that it was kind of an outsider's perspective on the events that the X-Men perpetrated over time, and it's kind of like this, you know, telling of their story, but as somebody trying to tell it from this kind of fictional line. And it's actually interesting because the amount of emotion that each character has when they look at these comics seems to be very telling of how much is true and how much is a lie, as you'll see Wolverine get very emotional looking at certain things, and Charles Xavier himself, kind of when he was forced to talk about certain events in the comics, it seemed like he was aware which ones were real and which ones weren't. Plus, it's always just cool for something like this to be that self-referential and try to fit it into its own world. Going into the spoiler section, we're going to be talking about some of the finer details and the emotional heavyweights of the movie. So one detail-oriented one that I thought was very interesting was the way that the movie kind of littered out these, I guess, brands that they had within the movie. They weren't known brands or anything like that, but there was a soda brand, and then they talked about this corn and corn syrup for a lot of the movie, and I thought it was very interesting that they kept focusing on this and bringing it up. I was wondering, like, when's this going to pay off? Is this some weird sort of corporate commentary? And then there's this line by the villain Dr. Rice near the end of the movie where he talks about how the disappearance of the, I guess, the birth of mutants had been caused because they started sneaking stuff into chemicals and brands that everybody was drinking to reduce the likelihood of mutants appearing through all the food that they were consuming. And I thought this was a very interesting way, and actually wrapped all these details together, made you understand why they would focus and have so many shots of this random brand of soda that doesn't actually exist. That I thought it was a very interesting way to actually kind of have this and be like, oh look, this mutant is even, you know, drinking this soda. And I thought it was a very cool way of a movie to try and do a very visual and, you know, have this one line of dialogue explain everything. I'm very much a fan of the, you know, do a lot of visual storytelling that's all explained by one line of dialogue that you could totally miss. I think it's actually a very cool and not too exposition heavy of a way to tell a story while having these details go off in the background. I also felt like the chain of relationships leading up to the characters' demises going near the end of the movie between Laura, Logan, and Charles Xavier just felt like this really interesting dynamic. I felt like there was a really great familial quality between all the characters, especially given certain lines about family and how the X-Men were like a family. And I felt like it was a really interesting note to kind of carry through the movie. That was kind of like one of the running themes actually of this movie. I felt like this chain of relationships really made them feel like this unit of a family, and it really made the moments when the characters reacted a lot stronger. I always find I get more emotional from a character's reaction to somebody's death than an actual character's death in a movie. I don't even want to mention anything beyond that. I mean, obviously characters are going to die in this movie, but I always always found these reaction shots to be the most powerful way for me, and I always get the biggest reaction out of something like this, and seeing a character like Logan trying to like physically absorb and emotionally absorb, I guess, the energy that he has to experience, you know, going through the passing of somebody. And just the heftiest spoiler of all, this is one if you've only seen the movie, I did feel like Logan's death was sad but kind of perfect. The line that he throws away, as I mentioned at the start of the video, so this is what it feels like, to me was just the most perfect line for him to go out on. It's always one of those things that watching some of the other Wolverine movies and just seeing his character have people in his life and they die, and just he doesn't even have a concept of what that would feel like, considering everything he's gone through, and he's dealt with so much physical pain that it just, you know, the concept becomes so foreign to him, that it was just such a beautiful line of dialogue for him to go out on. The way that they conduct his ending in the movie is just beautiful. I think the closing line of dialogue by Laura is like one of the saddest things I've seen in a movie in quite a while. I felt like it was very powerful. It was like so cheesy but powerful, that you just got so wrapped up in it. I could tell the second that she was watching that and they were overplaying this part of that movie, I believe it's called Shane. I will throw a text thing up if I got that wrong. But I felt like that was just, I knew that was going to be used near the end of the movie somehow, but it was just so beautiful that the way that they did it, and it really made you get wrapped up in the Western feel of the movie. And I just felt the end of this movie and the emotional weight that they send off Logan with is just so great, even down to the really corny turning of the cross. Well, Logan obviously isn't the 10 out of 10 movie that I've heard a lot of people touting it as. It is still by far the greatest movie in the Fox Marvel X-Men franchise, and either of their franchises overall, with I guess Deadpool coming in near the top there. But to be perfectly honest, I felt this was like emotional and just so stirring, and just a great movie overall. I felt overall that this movie would basically be considered like the Dark Knight of the Fox Marvel section of their chronology, not to compare it to a movie like that, but it feels like that's like their just standout. This is them making a movie that stands out as outside of the world of comic books. And thanks to some creative freedom with the rating and just the overall ability to make a story that can stand on its own and doesn't need to be fulfilling serious needs, I really felt that this movie was just one of the greatest movies I've seen coming out of the Fox Marvel canon just overall. And I just felt like this was something that really stood on its own. I want to give this an 8.5 out of 10. I just feel like this is a really great movie and a really great example of what you can do when you don't force somebody to make kind of this, I guess, churned out movie that's just, you know, have them fight the big thing, that really actually is telling a story about a character. And I really just felt like this was, you know, a great send-off for a character, and just a great movie overall that, once again, I feel like can actually stand as not just a comic book movie. As always, guys, you can check out everything I'm doing at the Owen Sound blog. You can check out my movie opinions with my friend Michael. We're going to be talking about Oscars and a bunch of movies we've seen recently. I also saw 20th Century Women, a couple other movies I'll be talking about very soon. You can check that out there. And to take this out, as I did call this the Dark Knight of the Fox Marvel series, I thought I wanted to ask you guys, what is your favorite comic book movie?